Greetings, ASA members. Let's talk Washington, D.C. and money. As the late Senator Everett Dirksen of Illinois once quipped, $1 million here, $1 million there, and pretty soon you're talking real money. Well, Congress talked real money last week. Congress released Consolidated Appropriations Act of Fiscal Year 18 last Wednesday. Remember, the final continuing resolution, which was funding the government, was set to expire on Thursday at midnight. So the House and Senate then both passed this bill on Thursday, or actually the early hours of Friday morning, and sent it to the president's desk for his signature. Now, President Trump initially tweeted opposition to the bill, but he reluctantly signed it on Friday morning. So the bill and its provisions fund the government for fiscal year 2018. Now remember, the federal government fiscal year starts October 1st, so this is actually October 1st of 2017 through September 30th of 2018. What that really means is, for schools, FY18 dollars will flow to our public schools during the 2018-19 school year. So this is the federal dollars for your schools for next year, the 2018-19 school year. Now remember, one of the reasons Trump didn't like this bill was he had said he wanted to cut government spending, but of course this bill includes huge increases in defense spending, but to get those increases he had to also agree on increases in non-defense spending, so debt will increase. Now, overall, the increases amount to some $63 billion. Specific to education, the bill provides a $3.9 billion, yes, that's with the B, a $3.9 billion increase to the United States Department of Education. So the U.S. DOE's budget total for FY18 is $70.9 billion. How big a piece of the pie is that? Well, if you'll look at this chart, you'll see that overall, it's fairly small. Remember, the three biggest parts of the federal spending pie are defense, Social Security, labeled pensions on this chart, and Medicare, labeled healthcare on this chart. Compared to that, our little 3% is a pretty small piece of the pie, but it's a bigger piece than we've had for the last few years. And while this represents a significant increase, if we go back to fiscal year 2012, based on inflation, it's actually a decrease. But hey, let's not complain. Let's be happy. Okay, the bill does reject the Trump administration's continued efforts to further advance their privatization agenda as well. There's not much money in it at all to advance that agenda. Program-specific funding levels are as follows. Let's talk about early education, first of all. Head Start, a $610 million increase. And that is significant for families that don't have any other access to quality preschool. Now, K-12 programs, ESSA, and this is important for our schools. Title I, a $300 million increase to Title I, up to $15.8 billion. So your Title I budget should be at least level funded for next year. Title IV, $700 million increase. Like Dirksen said, $1 million here, $1 million there. Pretty soon you're talking $700 million. That is real money. So now Title IV next year will be a $1.1 billion program. IDEA state grants, remember that's Part B, Special Ed, Part B. $275 million increase up to $12.3 billion, and that really helps with those Part B kids. Impact Aid, many of our districts were wondering about this. Impact Aid, $86 million increase, $1.4 billion overall. Charter schools, a $58 million increase, $400 million overall piece of the pie. Now here's another one that saw significant cuts in Arizona. We were very unpleasantly surprised. 21st Century Learning Community Centers. Trump said cut this out completely. Congress said 20 million increase, 1.2 billion total. So those of you that have really relied on 21st Century to fund your after-school programs, let's hope we can get this back on track in Arizona. State assessments, up to 378 million, and that's an increase. Career and technical ed, a small increase, 75 million, up to almost 1.2 billion. Homeless youth, a small increase. Rural education, a $5 million increase. ESSA Title II, level funded at about $2 billion. And a couple other things I want to mention. Secure rural schools in forest counties, very important to Yavapai County and some of our other counties. Secure rural schools, the bill reauthorizes and provides 2 years of funding for the SRS program. Very important. And the Center for Disease Control got an $800 million increase, and even more important, there's language in there which now allows the Center for Disease Control to study the effects of gun violence. Who would have thunk it? We should actually look into gun violence in this country. I, for one, am shocked. Let's leave the federal government behind. Yes, let's. Let's go to the State Board of Ed, which today passed the MOWR, Move On When Reading exemption, an additional one. Remember, that's the 4th exemption. A student doesn't have to be retained after 3rd grade if they're in ELL less than 2 years, if they're in the special ed review process to become a special ed student, or if they already are a special ed student. Now there's a 4th one. Let's call it the one bad day exemption. A student who's done very well on testing overall, well enough not to probably be a worry about being in that lowest 2%. Then suddenly they test poorly on AZ merit, and now you have to consider retaining them. Well, remember, there's an exemption now which says if they pass in one of the assessments on a collection of assessments approved by the State Board of Ed, if on that assessment they get a passing score, then they can go ahead and not be retained. And last year there were some 800 kids retained. And so there was a discussion today in the State Board of Ed about what assessments can be used by districts to administer to children who might have to be retained. And so there's a list of criterion that's been approved, that's been approved by the State Board, so districts can apply these criteria to potential assessments and decide whether or not this assessment, Ames Web, for example, could be used. Now, we know that almost a century of research says that retention is among the worst things that can ever happen to someone in 3rd grade. So I was a little surprised at the State Board of Ed discussion when one board member said, "Why are we going through all this? It's only 800 kids." Well, if you're one of those 800 kids who had a terrible, no good, very bad, horrible day and didn't pass, and you're going to be retained, then these assessments are pretty important for you. So please look now at the one bad day exemption if you have one of those 800 3rd graders whose fate hangs in the balance. Find the assessment, weigh it against the criteria, and make a decision for that child that's in that child's best interest. Remember, we have a number of professional learning opportunities coming up this spring and this summer. Take advantage of them, and I hope that your AZ merit testing goes well, not only for 3rd graders, but for all your students.